I'm Jessica Kramer with the Daily Caller News Foundation. Today we're speaking with New York State Senator Robert Ortt, who actually voted against the Reproductive Health Act. For those of you who don't know, the Reproductive Health Act is what some would consider one of the most gruesome abortion laws in the country. It allows abortion up until a woman is dilating and giving birth. Thank you so much for being here, Senator.
Well, thank you very much for having me, Jessica. And Democrats just recently passed a new law, what amounts to abortion on demand in New York. Democrats have portrayed it as codifying Roe v. Wade, but the reality is it really exceeds and expands upon definition of abortion and when you can perform an abortion. It also basically says that a number of other professions outside of licensed physicians can perform abortions. You can have an abortion up until the moment of birth. Essentially, it changes the legal definition. Mm-hmm. So we had a story where there was a Army veteran, a female Army veteran who had been pregnant, was stabbed several times by her ex-boyfriend. The child in her womb did not survive, and under the previous law, he was charged and could be charged with the loss of the child's life in that situation. Under the change, the law no longer recognizes that child's life in a legal sense. And so while he could be charged with assault, he could not be charged with manslaughter or murder or anything in relation to the loss of that child's life. Exactly. And that really is the point.
And now life is defined by a person being born. And so since they're not recognizing the unborn in utero, and it's been a viral video that's been all over Twitter. We see this video where your colleagues in the New York State Senate are standing in ovation and erupting in applause by passing this bill. Being a state senator, what was your reaction to that? What was it like being in that room? You knew that it was going to pass, but were you anticipating that reaction?
Yes, only because that has been the reaction with any number of recent progressive legislation. It was still disheartening and sad to witness that. As I said to someone, even if you're pro-choice, even if that's your viewpoint, I don't think that being able to have an abortion at 9 months, or the notion that we're going to have more abortions or unfettered access to abortion, I don't think should be hailed as some sort of positive or pinnacle of our society and civilization, and certainly should not be the height of women's rights to be able to do that, to me. And so it was disappointing. The statement on where New York is, especially for the rest of the country to see that, but that has been sort of the reaction to the deluge of progressive legislation that we've passed out of Albany recently. Every day that we're there is some advocacy group in the gallery that stands up and thunderously applauds the passage of these various bills, which they're actually not even supposed to do. They're supposed to be a decorum in the Senate gallery where that kind of display, it's not a sporting event. You're not supposed to get into that whole applause or booing thing. But the Democrats have sort of done away with those protocols since they've taken the majority.
Yeah, and now we've seen what's been going on in Virginia with a House delegate now supplying a very similar bill. It luckily got struck down in committee, but the governor himself actually made some really, I think, horrific comments and almost endorsing infanticide. So are you shocked that we're now seeing it in Virginia? And then on the other side of the aisle, Ohio is very close to passing a heartbeat bill. And so do you kind of see that this is going to start popping up in more states and we're going to be having more of this debate across the country?
I do. I think, and this happens, in other areas, but I think what's happened with the bill that we've passed, and certainly, New York State and New York City is the tip of the spear. They're the left wing of the left wing, right? And so I think that a lot of other progressive legislators across the country will look to follow the bill that we've passed and look at it as a standard. But also, they've moved the goalposts. So now this is now the expectation for progressive legislators when it comes to abortion. This is what they want. And so I think see conservative states or states where you have some strong form of pro-life legislators, you're going to see hopefully legislation to moving in the other direction. And so I think you're going to see a little bit of a reigniting of the abortion debate.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's coming directly from, in my view, from the left, because they want to move to unfettered access, abortion on demand, and even infanticide, which would have been, for you and I to have this conversation literally 10 years ago, we would have never believed it, right? This would have been a fringe discussion. And today it's moving into the mainstream. And I think that should concern every American, not only those who are pro-life.
Exactly. Now, specifically to the law in New York, do you foresee any challenges to this?
I certainly expect there to be some groups, whether they be pro-life groups, challenging this law, challenging the. That's really the only recourse we have is the courts. The Democrats control the governor's office, the Senate, and the Assembly in the state of New York. So politically, it's one-party rule. And the only recourse we would have on bills like this are in the courts, and maybe even up to the Supreme Court, depending on how this goes. So, and I think that's in a way what the Democrats even want. They want to have that government, right? This bill was around in New York State for about 10 years, maybe longer.
Yeah.
But they tried to pretend it was all about the president and Judge Kavanaugh, and that they were going to overturn Roe v. Wade, which really was a smokescreen. They've wanted to pass this for years in New York, at least some folks have, and now they had the landscape where they were able to do that. And again, I think it was a sad day for New York. When you literally, a baby that's 9 months in the womb, or even 8 months in the womb, in most cases, even where there might be a health issue, could be delivered safely, and the life of that mother could certainly, be addressed as well. But now they define health as even mental health. So even if a mother is depressed or is going through some, she will be able to have that abortion, no questions asked. And I just think that's a sad day for New York. And it's a sad testament to me that we have to have this debate. That's even a life.
Now, Governor Cuomo has doubled down on this, and he said that he wants to enshrine this in your state constitution. What is a pro-life New York representative, assemblyman, or state senator? What is your recourse of action? How are you going to stop that from transpiring?
Well, that's a little bit harder for them, because the way our Constitution reads, if you want to amend it, it would need to pass both houses of the legislature 2 consecutive sessions, and then it would go to the ballot for the public to vote on. And so obviously, we would do our best to not have it pass legislatively, but failing that, then you would try to work with outside groups and with the broader public, because I think this is even too far for the public. If they really understood that this isn't about women's health at all. This is, in fact, if anything, it goes against women's health. So I think the more the public learns about this kind of bill, I think getting this passed, even in a state like New York, no question it's possible, because we are certainly a left-leaning state. But I think that would be the recourse to try to stop it when it came up for a referendum on the ballot. If it were to pass both houses of the legislature, and then if it would go to a referendum or a public, it'd be on the ballot for a referendum by the voters. I think we could, certainly, by educating the voters on what this bill really does, the more I think people learn about this bill, the less they are inclined to support it. I think in that situation, that would be our best recourse to try to defeat something like this. If it's still passed on a referendum, then we would always potentially have a legal challenge. But I think that's still probably 2 or 3 years. Certainly a constitutional amendment would be very bad for anyone who cares about pro-life.
Yes. Now, even on a national scale, we had one of our reporters going and asking Democratic members of the House and Senate what they thought about all these comments coming out about infanticide and third trimester late term abortion, and a lot of them don't want to talk about it. A lot of them don't want to answer, and I'm even noticing a few Republicans remaining really silent on this issue. Since Democrats are now radicalizing so far to the left on this issue, do you think that this is going to give some momentum to impassioned conservatives that believe that a baby in the first trimester is just as important as a baby in the third trimester?
Yeah, I certainly hope so. I know that there's always been, I think for several years, look, this is a very impassioned debate, and generally you're on one side or the other. And I think sometimes legislators are loath to sort of wade into it, right? Because, you might have half your constituents agree with you and half your constituents disagree on either side. To me, I've always been open about being a pro-life and trying to explain to people why I'm a pro-life legislator. And I understand some people may disagree with me, but again, I think when you're late term, at the moment of birth, up to and including the moment of birth, I think even for some folks who might consider themselves pro-choice, this is way too far. Way too far. I think about all the mothers out there, people that have adopted children, people that have children that might have a developmental disability. Those children are their life. They love their children. They couldn't imagine a world without their children, and yet that's what we're saying now. We're saying that, basically for almost any reason, or for certainly a much broader range of reasons, you can abort a pregnancy of a child. You can take a child's life that has no recourse or right, apparently, legally, under the law. And I don't think that's something that, as a country or as a state, we should ever want to be at or want to be. That's what China does.
Yeah.
That's what other countries do. And that is not what we do here in the United States. And so I would like to think that even in this polarized political climate, that is something we could agree on, is that a child at 9 months is a child. It is a unique life and should be inviolable under the law. And hopefully this discussion can lead back to that part, to where we can agree on that.
Okay. Yeah. And just last question, if I was a New York resident and I was super pro-life and I'm really upset about this, what can I look to for hope in terms of any other bills or any other potential recourse coming from this bill specifically?
Well, I think you can take solace in two things. One, there were a number of Republican legislators lost the debate that I thought spoke very eloquently on this issue, even legislators that I had never really heard speak before on the floor. This was an issue where they clearly felt impassioned about. And so I do feel that the pro-life legislators and folks who are pro-life felt a little bit more emboldened to speak out than they were before. And that's what we're going to have to do. I also think, the courts are still an avenue to protect the life of a child, but also at the end of the day, the fact that we have a Supreme Court that I think is filled with more conservative judges who do respect life and the Constitution, I think is something that we can take some solace in, the fact that this won't expand beyond New York to the whole country, because I think you're going to see that in other states. You're going to see that move. But look, New York has always been a liberal state. We adopted a law protecting abortion 3 years before Roe v. Wade back in 1970. So I think that shows you that even historically, unfortunately, New York has not been a pro-life friendly state.
Planned Parenthood was started in New York too, so heavy ties, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, Planned Parenthood they are welcomed on the Senate floor. They are a very active organization here in New York, very politically involved. Obviously, mostly on the Democratic side, if not completely on the Democratic side. And, that's again, continues to be an organization that a lot of my colleagues on the Republican side, rightfully so, have a real issue with. And the notion that they're a bipartisan organization or non-political is really almost laughable, certainly here in New York.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much. I've really appreciated getting to hear from somebody that is a part of what is going on in New York and who witnessed the bill and voted against the bill. So I thank you for that, and I thank you for your time today. Thank you.
Jessica, thank you for your time, and I appreciate you covering the story.
And thanks for tuning in to the Daily Caller News Foundation.